Let's spend a little bit of time today and go over some takeaways from my recent project replacing drip line in my yard. If you see any of this, or if you have a crew that's putting this into new construction, fire them immediately, because this is what I call schedule crap. It's just junk. This is a regular Schedule 40. This one is a 1-inch line. This is a 3/4 inch line. You notice how thin it is. As soon as you get you have to work on something in your yard, as soon as you get anywhere near it and you hit it with a shovel or a pick, that's what's going to happen. I had to replace lines in my yard because of that, so just do not use this kind of junk. Now, I live in Arizona, and it's very popular to put this 5/8 drip line into drip borders. I have to dig it up about 3 times a year, and or a bunch of times. They break. They get old, they get brittle, they crack and break. So I'm in the process of replacing an entire station that had this with just regular funny pipe, which is much thicker, much more durable, and should give me much less trouble. Particularly in Arizona when people put drip lines in these gravel beds. What happens in these gravel beds is that the gravel works its way into the soil and eventually into your 5/8 diameter drip hose, and it just breaks and cracks and creates a maintenance nightmare. So every time I get a leak now, I'm stripping it up and putting in funny pipe. Now that means that you have to, it's a little bit tougher to get these 1/4 inch hose connections in place. But I do that. I've stripped out all my old ones. I'm just going to reuse them. There you see the little barbed end on it. I've got a drill here that I'm going to use. It's a 5/32 drill bit. So you drill that right into the funny pipe carefully, making sure you don't go out the other side, and then use a pair of pliers to grab onto the 1/4 inch barb fitting and just jam it into the funny pipe as I go. Here you can see the project midstream. I've dug up the old line, stripped it up, replaced it with funny pipe, and now I'm just putting in the individual barbed fittings for the 1/4 inch lines to go back to the plants to keep them all watered. Notice that I did go underneath the sidewalk here with the funny pipe. I've got all the connections in place. Those are pretty self-explanatory. You're going to need something like this. You can buy these at any like a Home Depot or Lowe's. You just have to build it out of PVC and put a nozzle on the bottom of it so you can hook a hose up to it. It squirts water at high pressure out here, and you can just shove it underneath your sidewalk and it'll dig as it goes. Then you just feed through with a piece of funny pipe. Now, you don't want to feed through funny pipe with an open end and just fill it full of dirt when you're shoving it underneath, so I built this out of a connector, a barbed connector for funny pipe. Just cut off a small piece of funny pipe, attached it to one end, smashed it down with a pair of pliers, and used a candle to melt that side of it so that it's just closed. That way when I shove it underneath the sidewalk, it doesn't take a core sample of mud when it does that. This shows the project. I had the old drip hose coming out of here. Just bought a fitting for funny pipe to go into that female connection on the pressure reducer right there. This is a drip station, so it's got a filter and a pressure reducer on it after the valve. And we're good to go. I'm just putting down the funny pipe here and putting into it the 1/4 inch barbed lines to the individual plants, and I'm just holding it in place with some rocks till I have a chance to fill it with sand, which is less abrasive to the funny pipe or whatever drip line you have than the really coarse gravel is. This little connection right here is what happened where I was digging in this area, and I accidentally broke that cheap garbage material that was put in here originally. So you can see I've got that all patched up with couplers. I found this in the hardware store, which is really neat. This is where the valve comes out. It's got a female 1-inch connection right here, and you have to screw that in, and it becomes problematic when you're putting these slip fittings on with the primer and with the cement goop, and then you slide them together. There's millions of videos about that. But this particular device I think is really nice because what it allows is there are two rubber O-rings inside that allow this thing to slide back and forth. And what that gives you the ability to screw this end on. It's a slip fitting, so the slip fitting goes over the end after you've screwed it in, and you can just cement it in place, and then it screws on to the rest of this and seals it off. But it also gives you the ability to move that thing back and forth, and it doesn't lose its seal as it goes. So it gives you the ability to put in these slip connections. And this is great because in the future, if I ever need to come in here and swap out these valves, somehow you have to unscrew the valve, and the only way to do that is to disconnect it. Well, you can't disconnect it if it's attached to a rigid hose, but because this is on O-rings right in here, this whole assembly, let's see, not from this point over here, this whole assembly will rotate on those things, on those O-rings, so that you can unscrew this fitting without creating all kinds of nightmare problems, because it's rigid now from that point out. So I would highly recommend, whenever you're doing valves, to put them up by default with these in there, so that the valves are serviceable. I'm fortunate living in Arizona that I don't have to dig very deep because we don't really get a frost line around here. It freezes at night once in a while in January-ish, but not enough to require me to put the water lines deep down inside or to do any kind of winterization. They'll be fine just a few inches below ground in this case. But if you live in a cold climate, you'll need to put that stuff deeper according to local codes. Okay, here it is all finished and happy, and got those lines all buried. Everything is working ideally. Keep in mind, this is by no means a full coverage of all of the principles of drip, but I've covered the key gotchas in my case, so I hope you find those useful. Thank you for watching.